The great doors of the council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Ambassador Lee Hyun stepped inside, his black diplomatic uniform crisp and clean. Behind him walked Captain Park Mina, her hand resting easily on her sidearm, and Dr. Kim Tae, carrying a small datapad with Earth's monthly reports. The chamber was massive, built like a giant circle with seats arranged in rings. At the center sat a holographic display showing star maps and trade routes. But what caught the eye was not the technology. It was the silence. 46 different alien species stood perfectly still around their seats. Not one of them sat down. Not one of them spoke. All eyes turned to watch the three humans walk across the polished floor. Rethvar of the crystalline hegemony shifted slightly, his diamond-like body catching the light. He had joined the council only last month and still found human customs strange. Next to him, Vorthak of the Insectoid Collective clicked his mandibles quietly, a sign of impatience among his people. "Why do we wait?" Rethvar whispered, his voice like wind chimes. "My people have important trade matters to discuss." Vorthak's compound eyes focused on the approaching humans. "Ancient protocol," he buzzed softly. "Humans sit first, always." "But why? No one remembers anymore. It has always been this way." The humans reached their section of the chamber. Their seats looked plain compared to the crystal platforms of the hegemony, the climate-controlled pods of the Aquatic Federation, or the magnetic suspension fields used by the gas-being collective, just three simple chairs made of Earth materials. Lee Hyun nodded politely to the nearest alien delegates, then sat down. Captain Park took her seat to his left, eyes scanning the room out of habit. Dr. Kim sat to his right, already reviewing his notes. The moment all three humans were seated, the chamber came alive. Crystalline beings chimed as they settled onto their platforms. Insectoid delegates clicked and buzzed as they arranged themselves. The aquatic species made splashing sounds in their water tanks. Gas beings hissed as they adjusted their containment suits. Elder Krithnos of the Avian Confederation ruffled his golden feathers and spoke in his melodic voice. "The monthly assembly of the Galactic Council is now in session. We begin with trade, route negotiations between the Outer Rim colonies and the core worlds. For the next 2 hours, the Council discussed normal business, shipping schedules, mining rights, cultural exchange programs. Lee Hyun participated when Earth's interests were involved, but mostly he listened. This was how diplomacy worked: patience, attention, and careful words. Dr. Kim presented Earth's monthly report on agricultural exports. The human colonies had exceeded their grain production targets again. Several species relied on human-grown food, finding it more nutritious than synthetic alternatives. Captain Park said nothing during the session, but her presence was felt. Other species knew that where human diplomats went, human military protection followed. It had been that way for over 3 centuries. The routine was interrupted by a sharp alarm. Red lights flashed around the chamber as the central holographic display switched from trade charts to a tactical map of the Outer Rim. "Emergency transmission incoming," announced the Council's AI system. A desperate voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Captain Yixtal of the refugee ship New Haven. We are under attack by pirate vessels. Repeat, we are under attack. 50,000 refugees from 7 different species aboard. We have no weapons and minimal shields." The tactical display showed the situation clearly. A large civilian ship surrounded by 6 heavily armed pirate vessels. The refugee ship's shields were failing fast. "Location confirmed," the AI continued. "New Haven is in the Kepler 442 outer system, approximately 6 hours from the nearest patrol route." The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives began talking at once in dozens of different languages and communication methods. Some species flashed lights, others released chemical signals, and a few broadcast telepathic messages that made sensitive species uncomfortable. Thexander of the warrior caste slammed his massive fist on his platform. "We must respond immediately. The crystalline hegemony requires consultation with all 13 subcastes before military action," replied Morthek, his faceted body reflecting the emergency lights. "This will take at least 8 hours. My people need to poll our billion-member democracy, buzzed Vorthak. Such a vote requires 12 hours minimum. The Aquatic Federation must consult with our depth lords across 3 different star systems, gurgled Neptara from her water tank. The communications delay alone will take 4 hours. Zephyra of the telepathic collective broadcast waves of distress. The death fear from the refugee ship is overwhelming our shared consciousness. We cannot think clearly enough to make decisions. Elder, Krithno spread his wings for attention. Fellow council members, we must follow proper procedures. Emergency protocols require unanimous consent before another transmission cut through the debate. This time the voice was weaker, filled with static. New Haven to any vessels in range. Pirates have boarded our ship, fighting in the lower decks. We estimate 20 minutes before they reach the civilian areas. The chamber fell into panicked discussion again. Each species began frantically contacting their home governments, trying to speed up their decision-making processes, but everyone knew their systems were not built for rapid response. Li Hyun sat quietly in his chair, listening to his communication device. Captain Park leaned over to whisper something in his ear. Dr. Kim showed him data on his pad, fleet positions, response times, tactical assessments. The debate grew louder as precious minutes ticked away. Rethvar noticed that while every other species was arguing or consulting their governments, the humans remained calm. They were doing something, but what? The hegemony's subcastes are in emergency session, called out Morthek. We should have a decision in 6 hours. My people are voting now, buzzed Vorthak. Results in 10 hours. The depth lords are still being contacted, reported Neptara. Another weak transmission. New Haven. Pirates in civilian deck 7. Children screaming, please. Anyone. That was when Li Hyun stood up. The chamber fell silent. Not because of any protocol this time, but because something in the human's posture commanded attention. He looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes or eye equivalents of every species present. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but clear. Earth fleet vessels are already moving toward the New Haven. We will engage the pirates immediately. He paused, looking directly at the tactical display. Any species that wishes to assist is welcome to follow our lead. The chamber exploded in shocked voices. By what authority? Demanded Thexander. The council has not voted, chimed Morthek. Humans cannot act unilaterally, buzzed Vorthak. Li Hyun ignored the protests. He activated his communicator and spoke, calmly. Commander Oh-Seung, this is Ambassador Lee. You are authorized to engage. Save those people. On the tactical display, new dots appeared. Human patrol ships changing course, accelerating toward the crisis at maximum speed. The council chamber buzzed with activity as species representatives watched the tactical display. 3 human patrol ships were racing toward the New Haven at maximum speed. Their estimated arrival time showed on the screen in bright blue numbers. 4 hours and 37 minutes. Commander Oh-Seung's voice came through the communication system, calm and professional. Earth vessels, Storm Rider, Mountain Peak, and River Song responding to emergency. We are outnumbered 2 to 1, but we have better weapons and trained crews. Li Hyun remained standing while chaos erupted around him. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting questions, making demands, and trying to contact their home governments. The noise was incredible. Clicks, chimes, growls, electronic beeps, and telepathic static that made sensitive species hold their heads. How dare you act without council approval? Roared Thexander, his warrior species built for combat and proud of their military traditions. This sets a dangerous precedent. The human fleet is small, chittered Vorthak, his insectoid mind quickly calculating odds. 6 pirate ships against 3 patrol vessels, they will be destroyed. Zephyra broadcast waves of concern that rippled through the chamber. Several telepathic species winced as her worry affected their minds. The death fear grows stronger from the refugee ship. Civilians are dying. Captain Park stepped closer to Li Hyun and spoke quietly in his ear. He nodded and activated his communicator again. Commander O, what's your tactical assessment? The pirates have old military hardware, probably stolen from decommissioned fleets. Their ships are bigger, but slower. Stormrider and Mountain Peak will engage directly while Riversong evacuates civilians. We'll need support ships for a full evacuation, but we can hold them off. Dr. Kim was busy on his datapad, coordinating with other human vessels in nearby systems. Ambassador, I have 2 cargo ships and a medical frigate that can reach the area within 6 hours. They can take refugees if we secure the area. Around them, alien species were struggling with their own response systems. Morthek's crystalline body flashed different colors as he communicated with his subcasts. The lights were pretty, but the process was painfully slow. Subcast 7 is still debating the moral implications, he announced. Subcast 12 wants environmental impact studies before approving military action. Vorthak's antennae twitched as data flowed from his billion-member democracy. Current vote status: 42% in favor, 38% opposed, 20% requesting more information. The debate continues. Elder Krithnos of the Avian Confederation ruffled his feathers in frustration. The Confederation Council is in emergency session, but our procedures require each world to send a representative in person. The fastest ship will arrive in 18 hours. Neptara splashed in her water tank as she received updates from the Aquatic Federation. 3 of our depth lords are unreachable due to seasonal migration patterns. We cannot proceed without full consultation. The tactical display updated with grim news. The refugee ship's shields had failed completely. Pirate boarding parties were fighting security forces in the main corridors. Red zones on the ship map showed areas already under pirate control. New Haven to any responding vessels, came a weaker transmission. Pirates have taken engineering. We're losing life support on decks 4 through 8. Estimate 3,000. Civilians trapped in those sections. Li Hyun closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and looked around the chamber. While we debate procedures, people are dying. Commander O will engage in 4 hours. Any species that can provide support should do so now. But the legal implications, protested Morthek. Military action requires proper authorization. My people's vote won't be finished for 8 more hours, buzzed Vorthak. The Confederation cannot act without full consensus, squawked Elder Krithnos. Then don't act, said Captain Park suddenly, her military background making her voice sharp. Stay here and debate, we'll handle it. The chamber fell silent at her words. It was the first time the human security chief had spoken during the session, and her tone cut through all the political noise. Dr. Kim looked up from his datapad. I've been studying our historical records of similar situations. In the past 300 years, the Council has faced 47 emergency situations requiring immediate military response. Average decision time, 14 hours and 26 minutes. Average civilian casualties during the decision period, 12,431. The numbers hung in the air like a physical weight. Several species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rethvar's crystalline form reflected the emergency lights as he spoke carefully. Dr. Kim, what is the average human response time for similar emergencies? 47 minutes from initial alert to first ships moving, Kim replied without hesitation. Average civilian casualties during our response time, 84. The difference was staggering. Other species began to murmur among themselves, but Li Hyun held up his hand for attention. We're not criticizing your decision-making processes, he said calmly. Your systems work well for your people and your cultures. But in a crisis, someone has to act fast. Today, that's us. The tactical display chimed with an update. 2 more. Human ships had changed course to support the rescue operation. A medical vessel and a fast attack craft were also moving toward the New Haven. Commander O's voice crackled through the speakers. Additional update. I have visual confirmation of the pirate fleet. They're using converted mining ships with military weapons. Definitely stolen hardware. We can take them. Estimated casualties? Asked Captain Park. For us? Minimal. For them? They'll surrender once they realize they're outgunned. Pirates don't like fair fights. Thexander's massive form leaned forward. Human commander, your 3 ships against 6 pirate vessels is hardly what my people would call a fair fight. You're right, came O's reply, and they could hear the smile in his voice. It's not fair to the pirates. Despite the tension, several alien representatives made sounds that might have been laughter. Even in crisis, humans found ways to joke. But the mood turned serious again as another weak transmission reached them. New Haven, life support failing, children in the safe rooms, and please hurry. Zephara's telepathic broadcast shifted from worry to something else, a strange mixture of fear and respect. The human minds are different. While we debate and calculate, they simply decide. It's almost frightening how fast they choose. Lee Hyun nodded slowly. Speed isn't always good. Sometimes quick decisions are wrong decisions, but today a slow decision is a death sentence for 50,000 people. The Chamber's AI announced an update. Human fleet ETA to crisis zone, 4 hours, 18 minutes. Additional human support. Vessels ETA, 6 hours, 12 minutes. Around the room, alien species were still struggling with their decision-making systems. Lights flashed, voices buzzed, water splashed, and telepathic waves rippled through the chamber. But no other species had managed to authorize military action. The hegemony subcasts request a detailed cost-benefit analysis, reported Morthek. My people want to know if the refugees can pay for rescue services, chittered Vorthak. The Confederation requires environmental impact studies for any military engagement, said Elder Krithnos. Lee Hyun sat back down in his simple chair, his expression calm but tired. Commander O, proceed as planned. Rules of engagement are standard. Protect civilians, minimize casualties, accept surrender if offered. Understood, Ambassador. See you on the other side. The communication ended, leaving the chamber in an uncomfortable silence. On the tactical display, human ships continued their high-speed approach to what might be a battle that would save 50,000 lives or cost human lives in the attempt. Captain Park stood behind Lee Hyun's chair like a guardian, her eyes never leaving the display. Dr. Kim continued coordinating support vessels and medical supplies, and Lee Hyun sat quietly, carrying the weight of a decision that could make him a hero or a war criminal, depending on how the next few hours played out. In the silence, Rethvar whispered to Vorthak, "How do they decide so fast?" "I don't know," the insectoid replied, "but I'm beginning to understand why they sit first." 12 hours had passed since Commander Osung's fleet engaged the pirates at the New Haven. The council chamber felt different now, heavier, charged with tension that had nothing to do with the emergency lighting that had finally been turned off. The rescue had been a complete success. All 50,000 refugees were safe, transferred to medical and transport ships. The pirates had surrendered after just 20 minutes of fighting, their converted mining ships no match for trained human military crews. 0 casualties among the rescue fleet, 0 civilian deaths during the engagement. But success had brought new problems. Lee Hyun sat in his chair, looking more tired than anyone had ever seen him. Captain Park stood nearby, her hand still resting on her weapon out of habit. Dr. Kim was reviewing damage reports and casualty figures on his data pad, though the numbers made for pleasant reading this time. The chamber filled with representatives, who had spent the night in emergency sessions with their home governments. Now they were back, and many of them were angry. Thexander of the warrior caste was the first to speak, his massive frame towering over the other delegates as he stood. "Ambassador Lee Hyun, you took military action without council approval. You dragged 12 other species into combat without their formal consent. By what right do humans make decisions for the entire galaxy?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Morthek's crystalline body flashed angry red colors. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in a pattern that meant displeasure among his people. Even usually calm species seemed upset. "The crystalline hegemony demands an explanation," chimed Morthek. "Our subcastes spent 18 hours in emergency session only to discover their ships had already joined the battle following human orders. My people's democracy was completely bypassed," buzzed Vorthak. "Human commanders contacted our fleet directly and requested immediate assistance. Several of our captains agreed without waiting for governmental approval." Elder Krithnos ruffled. his golden feathers. The Avian Confederation has protocols that have served us well for 2,000 years. Yesterday, those protocols were ignored because human ships were already fighting. Li Hyun listened to each complaint without interrupting. When the initial wave of anger had passed, he stood slowly and looked around the room. 50,000 people are alive today, he said simply. That's what matters. That's not the point, roared Thexander. The point is authority. Chain of command, proper procedures. You can't just decide for everyone. We didn't decide for everyone, Captain Park said, stepping forward. We decided for ourselves. Other species chose to follow. Because you put them in an impossible position, chittered Vorthak. Once human ships were fighting, what choice did they have? Let you die alone? Dr. Kim looked up from his datapad. Would you prefer we had let 50,000 civilians die while waiting for proper procedures? That's not the choice, flashed Morthek, his body cycling through angry colors. The choice is between acting properly and acting recklessly. No, came a new voice from across the chamber. Admiral Choi Yuna materialized as a hologram, her image flickering slightly due to the long-range transmission from Earth. The choice is between acting quickly and acting slowly. Sometimes there's no time for proper procedures. The Admiral's presence changed the atmosphere in the room. She was a legend. 60 years of military service, veteran of dozen conflicts, architect of the modern human fleet. When she spoke, even angry aliens listened. I've been reviewing the tactical data from yesterday's engagement, she continued, her voice calm and professional. 6 pirate vessels, heavily armed, with hostages. Standard Council response time for such a situation is between 12 and 16 hours. The refugees had maybe 3 hours before life support failed completely. Thexander crossed his arms. That's not the issue, Admiral. The issue is that humans consistently act without consulting others. You make unilateral decisions that affect everyone. Because we can, Admiral Choi said simply. Our government structure allows rapid decision-making. Yours don't. That's not good or bad. It's just different. Sephara had been quietly broadcasting telepathic observations since the session began. Now she spoke aloud, her voice carrying the weight of collective thought. The human minds work differently than ours, she said. Where we see complex webs of consequence and procedure, they see simple problems with direct solutions. It's unsettling. Rethavar had been silent during most of the debate, but now his crystalline form chimed softly. I've been researching human history since yesterday. In the past 3 centuries, they've initiated 43 major rescue operations, 17 peacekeeping missions, and 8 full-scale wars. In every case, they acted first and sought approval later. Exactly, buzzed Vorthak. They're reckless. But, Rethvar continued, their success rate is 96%. Average civilian casualties in human-led operations are 60% lower than Council average. And in every case where they acted quickly, waiting for proper approval would have resulted in significantly more deaths. The chamber fell quiet as the implications sank in. Dr. Kim stood and activated the central holographic display, showing statistical analysis. Here's the data, he said, his voice carrying the weight of careful research. Emergency situations in the past 300 years, response times, casualty figures, success rates. Charts and graphs filled the air above them. Human-led responses, average 47 minutes to action, average civilian casualties 84. Council-led responses, average 14 hours to action, average civilian casualties 12,000. The numbers were devastating. Even the angriest species representatives couldn't argue with mathematics. But Thexander wasn't finished. Numbers don't justify bypassing legitimate authority. What happens when humans make the wrong choice? What happens when your quick decisions lead to disaster? It was Elder Krithnos who answered, his ancient voice carrying weight earned through centuries of experience. Then they pay the price. That's what authority means. Responsibility for consequences. The old avian's words seemed to resonate through the chamber. Captain Park nodded slowly. Every human commander knows that quick decisions can be wrong. Decisions. We accept that risk because the alternative, no decision, is often worse. But who gave you that right? Demanded Morthek, his crystalline form still flashing angry colors. Who decided that humans should be the ones to act first? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lee Hyun exchanged glances with Captain Park and Dr. Kim. There was something in their expressions, not guilt but recognition. That's a fair question, Lee Hyun said slowly, and I think it deserves a proper answer. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's AI announced a new arrival. Ancient Archives Keeper Mordun requests permission to address the assembly. A hush fell over the room. Mordun was old even by galactic standards, a member of the first species, one of the original founders of the council. He rarely left his Ondo archive chambers deep in the station's core, and when he did, it was usually for matters of great importance. The ancient being entered slowly, his form shifting and flowing like living shadow. He had no fixed shape, existing as pure conscious energy contained within a mobile field generator. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I have been listening to this debate, he said, his words carrying the weight of eons. And I believe the time has come to remember something that has been forgotten. Mordun moved to the center of the chamber, his shadow form rippling with internal light. The question is not who gave humans the right to act. First, the question is why they earned it. Elder Krithnos leaned forward, his golden feathers gleaming. Keeper Mordun, do you mean to activate the ancient archives? I do, the shadow being replied. 347 years have passed since the first protocol was established. Perhaps it is time to remember why. The chamber's lights dimmed as ancient systems activated. Holographic projectors that hadn't been used in decades began to hum with power. Around the room, representatives settled into their seats, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. What you are about to see, Mordun announced, is the true reason why humans sit first in every council chamber. The reason why they are permitted to act without consensus. The reason why, when crisis comes, we look to them for leadership. The air above the chamber began to shimmer as historical records from 3.5 centuries ago prepared to replay the galaxy's darkest hour. The council chamber transformed as the ancient archives activated. The walls became transparent, replaced by a vast holographic recreation of space 347 years ago. Stars wheeled overhead, showing the galaxy as it once was younger, more crowded with civilizations that no longer existed. Behold the great Devourer crisis. Mordun's voice echoed from everywhere at once. The darkest period in recorded galactic history. The holographic display zoomed in on a region of space near the galactic rim. What they saw made several species representatives gasp in shock. Entire star systems were dark, not destroyed, but consumed. Where planets should have been, there were only empty spheres of metal and machinery. The Devourer swarm emerged from dark space without warning. Mordun continued. Mechanical entities of unknown origin that consumed all matter, planets, ships, stations, even stars themselves, and converted it into more of their kind. The display showed the swarm in terrifying detail. Vast mechanical constructs moved between systems like a plague of metal locusts, each one the size of a moon. They surrounded planets and stripped them down to bare rock, then consumed the rock itself. Nothing was left behind except more devourers. In 6 months, they consumed 43 inhabited systems, Mordun said, 700 billion souls of 32 different species. And the swarm grew larger with every world they took. Elder Krithnos spread his wings unconsciously, an instinct from when his people faced aerial predators. I remember the stories, passed down by my ancestors, the fear that gripped the galaxy. The hologram shifted to show the council chambers of that era. The same circular design, but with different species, many that no longer existed. Representatives argued frantically as red zones spread across the galactic map. The established civilizations tried to respond, Mordun continued. But their governmental systems were not designed for such a crisis. They watched as the crystalline hegemony's ancestors debated for months, while entire star systems went dark. The insectoid collective's billion-member democracy couldn't achieve quorum as colony after colony was consumed. The Avian Confederation required each world to send representatives in person, but many worlds no longer existed by the time their delegates arrived. 18 months, Morden said softly. For 18 months, the established powers debated while the swarm consumed a third of the galaxy. Vorthak's mandibles clicked nervously. My people's historical records speak of the Great Silence, when votes could not be completed because the voters were being consumed faster than ballots could be counted. The holographic recreation showed the Devourer swarm spreading like a cancer across the galactic map. Entire spiral arms went dark. Trade routes collapsed. Refugee fleets fled deeper into the galactic core, carrying survivors from hundreds of dead worlds. Then humanity arrived, Morden said. The display shifted to show Earth, a single blue world in an unremarkable star system. Humanity had just achieved faster-than-light travel and was taking their first steps into galactic civilization. They were primitives by galactic standards, barely understanding the technology they used. Ambassador Kang Ji-woo was Earth's first representative to the galactic community, the archive keeper continued. A holographic figure appeared, a middle-aged Korean woman in a simple diplomatic uniform, standing before the ancient council. She arrived just as the crisis reached its peak. They watched as Kang Ji-woo was briefed on the situation. The holographic display showed her face as she learned about the Devourer swarm. 700 billion dead, entire civilizations wiped out, a mechanical plague consuming the galaxy. Her expression shifted from confusion to understanding to grim determination. The briefing lasted 4 hours, Morden said. At the end of it, Ambassador Kang made a statement that shocked the galactic community. The holographic Kang Ji-woo stood before the ancient council and spoke in clear, simple words. Earth will help. When do we start? No consultation with her government, observed Rethvar, his crystalline form reflecting the ancient images. No committees or subcastes or democratic votes. The other species couldn't believe it. Morden continued. They asked how she could commit her entire civilization to war without proper procedures. Her response became legendary. The holographic Kang Ji-woo smiled sadly and said, because someone has to. Because if we debate while the galaxy dies, there won't be anyone left to debate with. The display showed what happened next. Within days, not months or years, but days, human ships began arriving at the front lines. Crewed vessels by galactic standards but armed and ready to fight. While other species were still forming committees, humans were already engaging Devourer units. President Lim Sora, Earth's leader at the time, addressed the galaxy. Morden said. A new holographic figure appeared, a stern-faced woman speaking from Earth's capital. Her words were broadcast across every surviving world. My fellow sapient beings, the holographic president said. Earth may be small, and humanity may be young, but we know this truth. Evil succeeds when good people do nothing. Today, we choose to do something. The tactical displays showed human fleets moving to intercept Devourer swarms. They were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with desperate courage. Ship after ship fell to the mechanical monsters, but for every human vessel destroyed, they took Devourer units with them. Other species began to follow humanity's lead, Morden continued. Not because their governments had finally agreed to fight, but because human commanders were already in the field asking for volunteers. Captain Park leaned forward, recognizing military tactics from the holographic battles. They used human ships as coordination points. Other species that wanted to fight could join human-led task forces without waiting for their own governments to authorize action. Exactly, the archive keeper confirmed. Humanity became the galaxy's rapid response system. While civilizations debated, humans decided. While committees met, human ships moved. The war played out in accelerated time across the chamber's holographic displays. Months of desperate fighting with humanity at the center of every major battle. Human casualty rates were staggering. They lost ships faster than any other species because they always fought at the front. But slowly, the tide began to turn. The Devourer advance slowed. then stopped. For the first time since the crisis began, the mechanical swarm was being pushed back. The turning point came when humanity developed the sacrifice protocol, Mordun said, his shadow form rippling with ancient memory. Li Hyun sat up straighter in his chair. Even now, centuries later, that name carried weight among humans. The holographic display showed a desperate war council meeting. Human and alien leaders gathered around a tactical display showing the Devourer swarm's core, a massive mechanical construct at the galaxy's rim, spawning new units faster than they could be destroyed. The only way to stop the swarm was to destroy the core, Mordun explained. But it was protected by thousands of Devourer units and surrounded by an energy field that conventional weapons couldn't penetrate. Dr. Kim had been studying the tactical data. Quantum resonance weapons, he said quietly. Experimental devices that had to be delivered directly to the target. No remote firing, no safe distance. Correct, the archive keeper confirmed. The weapons were untested and highly unstable. Any ship carrying them would have perhaps a 10% chance of survival, and multiple ships would be needed to ensure success. The holographic war council showed alien representatives discussing the plan. Species after species explained why their governmental systems couldn't possibly authorize such a mission. The risk was too great, the chance of survival too small, the ethical implications too complex. Then President Lim Sora spoke. Earth will provide the ships and crews, she said simply. We'll volunteer. The alien representatives were stunned. How could she commit her people to almost certain death without debates, committees, or democratic votes? President Sora's holographic image stood slowly and addressed the council with words that would be remembered forever. Other species ask their citizens what they're willing to die for. Humans ask what they're willing to live for. Today we live so that others may continue to exist tomorrow. The final battle was shown in grim detail. 12 human colony ships, converted into massive bomb delivery systems, racing toward the Devourer core. Each ship carried 5,000 volunteers, civilians and military personnel who had stepped forward when their species needed them most. The chamber watched in silence as the human ships fought their way through waves of mechanical defenders. One by one they fell to Devourer fire, but each ship that died cleared the path for those behind it. 3 ships reached the core. 3 quantum weapons detonated simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that tore the massive construct apart. The Devourer swarm, cut off from its source, became mindless and was quickly destroyed by the combined fleets. But the cost was terrible. 60,000 human volunteers died in the final assault, including Ambassador Kang Jiwoo, who had insisted on being aboard the lead ship. Humanity lost nearly 30% of its population in the Devourer War, Mordun said softly. No other species paid such a price. They became heroes not because they won, but because they were willing to lose. Everything for others. The holographic display faded. The silence in the council chamber stretched like a held breath. The ancient holographic records had faded, leaving only the weight of history and the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Representatives from 46 species sat in their designated places, but now they understood why 3 simple chairs held such significance. Mordun's shadow form rippled in the center of the chamber. The first protocol was not created to give humans power, his voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. It was created because someone must be willing to bear the burden of quick decisions. Someone must be ready to pay the price when others cannot. Li Hyun sat quietly in his chair, his hands folded in his lap. The weight of 3 centuries pressed down on him. The knowledge that every human diplomat carried the memory of those 60,000 volunteers who died to save the galaxy. Rethvar was the first to break the silence. His crystalline form had shifted from its earlier angry red to a deep blue that meant respect among his people. Ambassador Li, I owe you an apology. We accused you of arrogance when you were simply carrying out your species' ancient duty. No apology needed, Li replied softly. Your questions were fair. Everyone deserves to understand why we do what we do. Dexander shifted his massive warrior's frame uncomfortably. But the risk, Ambassador. What if you make the wrong choice? What if your quick decision leads to disaster instead of victory? Captain Park stepped forward to answer. Then we accept responsibility for the consequences. That's what the first protocol means. We act first, but we also answer first for any mistakes. Dr. Kim activated his data pad and shared new information with the chamber's display. In the past 300 years, human-led emergency responses have failed 7 times. 7 times our quick decisions led to problems instead of solutions. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in surprise. You admit your failures openly? Of course, Lee said. We're not perfect. But in 6 of those 7 cases, investigation showed that waiting for full council approval would have made the disasters worse, not better. Only once would patience have been the better choice. Admiral Choi's hologram flickered as her transmission adjusted. The burden of the first protocol isn't just making quick decisions. It's living with the knowledge that every choice might be wrong, but choosing anyway because the alternative is paralysis. Zafara had been broadcasting quiet telepathic observations throughout the revelation. Now she spoke aloud, her voice carrying the weight of collective thought. I understand now why human minds feel different to us, she said. We think in networks, in consensus, in shared responsibility. You think in individual accountability. One person decides, one person bears the weight. It's lonely. Lee Hyun nodded slowly. Sometimes it is. But that's the job. Elder Krithnos spread his golden wings and stood, his ancient voice carrying the authority of millennia. The Avian Confederation formally reaffirms our support for the first protocol. We understand now that it serves the galaxy's needs, not just human ambitions. 1 by 1 other species began to voice their support. Morthek's crystalline body shifted to warm yellow colors as he spoke for the hegemony. Vorthak's democratic billion had reached a consensus in record time, 4 hours instead of their usual 10. Even the Aquatic Federation's depth lords had sent their approval through the long-range communications network. But it was Neptara who asked the hardest question. Her aquatic form moved gracefully in its tank as she spoke. Ambassador Lee, how do you train for such responsibility? How does your species prepare its people to make decisions that could save or doom thousands? Dr. Kim answered first. Every human child learns about the sacrifice protocol in school. We study the decisions made by Ambassador Kang and President Lim. We learn about the 60,000 volunteers who died to save the galaxy. But more than that, Captain Park added, we learn about the weight of command. Every human military officer, every diplomat, every leader knows that their choices have consequences. We're taught to decide quickly, but also to accept responsibility for whatever happens next. Lee Hyun stood and walked to the center of the chamber, near where Morden's shadow form waited. The hardest part isn't making the decision, he said. It's living with it afterward. Every human who takes a leadership position knows they might have to choose between bad options and worse ones. Like yesterday, observed Rethvar. You chose to risk human lives to save alien refugees. Your ships could have been destroyed. Yes, Lee admitted. Commander O and his crews knew the risks. They went anyway because that's what the job requires. The chamber's communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission. Commander O's voice filled the room, clear and professional. Ambassador Lee, refugee transport complete. All 50,000 civilians have been transferred to medical and resettlement ships. The pirate vessels have been secured, and their crews are in custody. No casualties among rescue forces or civilian populations. Thank you, Commander, Lee replied. Well done. Just doing the job, sir. O sends his regards. As the transmission ended, Admiral Choi's hologram smiled. That's what the first protocol looks like in practice. Quick decisions, trained professionals, and the willingness to risk everything for people you've never met. Morden's shadow form began to shift toward the chamber's exit. The ancient archives have served their purpose today. The young remember what the old have not forgotten. The first protocol stands validated once more. But before the archive keeper could leave, Thexander called out a final question. Keeper Morden, what happens if humanity ever refuses to carry this burden? What if they decide the weight is too heavy? The shadow being paused at the chamber's entrance. Then someone else must step forward to take their place. But in 3 centuries, no other species has proven willing or able to make the hard choices as quickly as humans do. Because, Elder Krithnos said softly, it is easier to criticize quick decisions than to make them. As Morden departed, the chamber fell into a different kind of silence, not uncomfortable now, but respectful. The emergency lights had been turned off hours ago, and normal illumination had returned. But something fundamental had changed in the room. Lee Hyun returned to his seat, settling into the simple chair that represented so much more than furniture. Captain Park resumed her position behind him, ever watchful. Dr. Kim packed away his datapad, the crisis management files no longer needed. The council will recess for 1 hour, announced Elder Krithnos. When we reconvene, we will address the trade route negotiations that were interrupted by yesterday's emergency. As representatives began to file out of the chamber, many paused to nod respectfully at the human delegation. Rethvar's crystalline form chimed a harmonic pattern that meant gratitude. Vorthak's antennae dipped in a gesture of respect. Even Thexander offered a warrior's salute. But it was Zephyra who lingered longest. Her telepathic abilities let her sense the emotional weight the humans carried, not just from yesterday's decision but from 3 centuries of similar choices. Ambassador, she said quietly, how do you bear it? The knowledge that any day might bring another impossible decision? Lee Hyun looked at her with tired but steady eyes. The same way your people bear the weight of shared consciousness, or how the Avian Confederation carries the memory of 2,000 years of wisdom. We do it because it's who we are. He paused, looking around the now empty chamber. Besides, we're not alone in this. Every time we make a hard choice, other species follow our lead. Yesterday, 12 different fleets joined our rescue operation. The burden is shared, even if the decision comes first from us. Captain Park checked her weapon and communication device out of habit. The weight gets easier when you remember why you carry it. 50,000 people went home to their families last night because we were willing to act fast. Dr. Kim gathered his materials and looked at the simple chairs that meant so much. Every human delegation knows the history. We know about Ambassador Kang and the Sacrifice Protocol. We know about the 60,000 volunteers who died to save the galaxy. That knowledge doesn't make the decisions easier, but it makes them necessary. As the 3 humans prepared to leave the chamber, Lee Hyun took one last look at the seats arranged in their great circle. Tomorrow there would be another session, and other species would wait respectfully for humans to sit first. Not because humans were better, but because they had proven willing to bear the weight of leadership when others could not. The first protocol would continue, as it had for 3 centuries, and somewhere in the galaxy, another crisis would eventually arise that required quick decisions and immediate action. When that day came, humans would be ready to choose first, act first, and if necessary, sacrifice first. It was a burden they had earned through blood and loss 300 years ago. It was a responsibility they carried still, one quick decision at a time. In the empty chamber, 3 simple chairs waited silently for the next time the galaxy would need someone to act without hesitation, to decide without delay, and to bear the weight of consequences that might save or doom thousands of lives. The first protocol endured the promise that when crisis came, someone would be ready to make the hard choices quickly, because in the vast darkness of space, sometimes, speed was the difference between salvation and tragedy.